Yeah. Used to be that. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
I'm sorry. I just had a thought. I mean, last night in Bible, my Bible reading was Obadiah, and I'm thinking of what's happening and we're reading that all of it. And it's just really awesome to me to just think about. I know it's not. Anyhow, it just struck me.
Yeah. It's a sensitive thing from a political perspective, and I would just say, as tempting as it is, to just keep in mind that there is no type of indication that we have from a biblical perspective regarding any type of significance or speciality concerning the physical nation of Israel. Politically, obviously, there's concerns, and I'm not going to get into that at all. But from a spiritual perspective, God's kingdom is the church, and it's such a blessing to be assured of that, by the way. Because as you know, there are many denominations who this morning will mount pulpits and go on and on and on, taking full advantage of the current events. And it is a blessing to know that God's kingdom is the church, and obviously the murdering and killing of any kinds of people are of a concern to us, and there are political implications, but from a spiritual perspective, it is comforting to know that the Church of Christ is here, and that we are able to fixate on an eternal kingdom, and the Old Testament kingdom and God's promises have all been fulfilled and are no longer in scope concerning His will and His purpose, because His purpose is salvation in Jesus Christ and the gospel. Romans chapter 1 and verse 16. And so actually with that in mind, let's go ahead and kind of carry on regarding our study of Daniel. And let's look at a few verses here. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44. If someone can get that for me. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44.
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
All right, and so that's a great example of kind of what we just discussed, right? God is looking forward to a kingdom that was not in existence. So this is a future kingdom. This is a kingdom that is irregardless of the physical aspects of what we read about throughout our Old Testament. And God is looking forward to what Jesus speaks of and what we learn of in his discussion with Pilate. John chapter 18 and verse 36, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews." Okay? So God was looking forward to a kingdom that would be above all other kingdoms, again, emphasizing God is the God of gods. Let's look at Daniel chapter 4. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17, if someone could read that for me.
This decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the Senate by the word of the Holy One, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men.
All right, thank you, brother. And so the one who is above all other rulers, all other powers, is he who has all power, and that is Almighty God. And then we see that being carried out in this very chapter. We noticed last week, Daniel chapter 4, verse 33, regarding Nebuchadnezzar, which, by the way, historically, there's a period of his reign and of his life that just there's no record of, which coincides with the state that he then endured regarding that type of behavior. Notice there in verse 33. But let's look at verse 32 of the same chapter. If someone could read that for me. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 32.
And shall drag his dominion, and his realm shall be with the beast. It shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High will eat with him, and gives it to whomever he chooses.
You know, this is such a powerful comfort because we are locked in to that which far exceeds the concerns of this physical life. Recently, Hannah and I, as you know, took our 15th anniversary trip, and we're grateful to be able to go out to California. And while we were out there, we went to a certain president's library and got an opportunity to really inject ourselves into the time period of that era and of his presidency. And by the way, everyone looked at us like we were crazy because, and Hannah then figured out why. Apparently, not a whole lot of young people, I guess, go through that exhibit. All the folks around us were probably 30 plus years older than we were, but we were fascinated. But throughout that time period of us being there and thinking about the time period of that presidency, you know, there are so many who absolutely invest their entire being into that system, into that ideology, into that time period, into those policies, into everything that makes up this country and that political game. But yet as a Christian, to go far beyond it and say, you know what? This is interesting. This is, you know, relevant and educational, and sure, there's things that are, you know, politically concerning and inspiring, etc. But we serve He who is above all of that. And you think about the context of Daniel, and you think about the various reigns that existed, and you think about what follows in verse 33 of Daniel chapter 4, folks, we serve He who is above all other powers, the God of gods. Let's look at Daniel chapter 6 and verse 26. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 26. If someone could read that for me.
I make a decree that in every domain of country, he is humble and fears God. He is living steadfast foot. He will that which shall not be, and the community even.
Okay, and so again, in those libraries, to kind of keep with that same thought for a second, what does every president create in those libraries and in those exhibits? We have one here in Georgia, for example, the president who came from this very state. What do you take away when you walk away from those libraries? Oh, this president was perfect. Well, look at the legacy that this president left. I mean, there's nothing wrong or any fault that you could ever find in this president whatsoever. But we all know that's not the case. And for those of you who lived through those presidencies, you know that's not the case, right? But yet we find here a king and a dominion and a power that is perfect, flawless, exact in terms of what man needs and requires. Given by who? Ruled by who? He who is eternal, the God of gods. Why do men trust in that which they perceive as equaling greatness? What do men trust in? What do men trust in terms of what they perceive as equaling greatness? What are some qualities that they would say that equals great? Money? Money? Accolades? Okay, so some type of achievement, right? You've achieved something. What usually is the result of that achievement? What is it that leads to that achievement? There's something that we usually identify and say, well, it's because this person had this, they're able to achieve things. Think about debates, for example. What really, and Steve's spot on regarding debates, by the way, they're not really debates anymore. They're just kind of like yelling matches and attempts to try to outdo one another from a image perspective. But what are people really trying to prove? I'm smarter, right? I'm smarter. My smarts are going to lead to achievements. My knowledge, my ability to understand and navigate is going to lead to X, Y, and Z. So resources, achievements, accolades, smarts, power, right? Military might. Let's look at Jeremiah chapter 9 in verse 23. Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 23, if someone could read that for me.
Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, and
All right, and so that which man will identify and say, this means this ruler, this person, this entity is great, boils down to these types of attributes: wisdom, knowledge, might, power, resources, or wealth. Those are the types of things that men then beat their chest and say, I have something to glory of. I am great. I am a lord or a little g God in the sense that I'm a ruler over man's affairs. And so therefore, because of my wisdom or knowledge, my power, my might, my wealth, my resources, therefore I'm great. What's God's response? Notice verse 34. Can someone read that for me?
Jeremiah 9.
Yeah, Jeremiah 9:34.
I got 9.
Oh, sorry. Jeremiah 24. Jeremiah 24. The next verse. I'm sorry. Thank you, brother.
No problem. But let him that glorieth, let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord.
And so God delights in us delighting in Him. God delights when we say God is the one who has the answers. God is the one. Any abilities that we have because of God's greatness. Anything that equals or yields, quote, success is the result of God's doing. That's what God delights in. And God's greatness far exceeds man's attempts to be great, by the way. And let's consider that together. What makes God, the one true and only living God, above all other forms of greatness? Well, let's consider His wisdom and His knowledge. God sees and knows everything. God sees and knows everything. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13. If someone else can get ready for me, Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 17. Jeremiah 16 and verse 17. Let's go to Hebrews 4 and verse 13 to begin here. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in His sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of unto the eyes of Him with whom we have to do, or with whom we have to give account. So everything is opened. Everything is exposed before Almighty God. He knows and sees everything. Someone get for me Jeremiah 16 and verse 17.
my eyes are on all their ways, they are not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity hidden from my eyes.
Everything that is done, all the acts and deeds of man, is all before the eyes of God. Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 3, and then if someone else can get for me, Psalm 11 and verse 4. So get ready, Psalm 11 and verse 4. Here is Proverbs 15 and verse 3. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. What do we associate with greatness? Visibility. Access to information. Why is the NSA so terrifying? Why is the CIA so terrifying? Because, frankly, we know the capability to essentially figure out, see, document, record, access, sometimes even in real time, stream anything taking place in any place in all of the globe is potentially possible. From a privacy perspective, we don't like that. From a privacy perspective, that's a concern. What do we associate with that? Power. Power. God, his eyes far exceeds that. Because God's ability goes beyond even what is being done. God's ability is in the mind of man, in the heart of man, the intents of man. God knows it. In every place. Psalm 11 and verse 4, if someone can get that for me.
The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. You want 5 read too?
That's okay. That's okay. So, God's eyes, again, are everywhere. Someone can get for me Job 34, 21 and 22. Job 34, 21 and 22. Here's Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 14. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. What's going on right now with the FTX situation? Yeah. Yeah, they're in court right now, settling this debacle of a situation, and really it just boils down to fraud. But they are unpacking all the emails, all the correspondence, and they're bringing it into the justice system and saying the folks who were at the head of this thing knew exactly what was going on. And they were directing the activities of what was going on. And it was by in no means an accident. It was taking place at their direction. And so what's happening? Things that were being done in secret, things that were occurring behind, quote, closed doors or under privacy labels and confidentiality are now all being brought to the forefront and are all then being examined in a court of law. Everything that we do, God is going to bring into judgment. Everything. Let's get Job 34, 21 through 22. So I'm going to read that for me.
For his eyes are upon the ways of man, and he seeth all his goings. There is no darkness nor shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves.
All right. Thank you, brother. I've heard of some which will claim, well, God doesn't see everything. And some will even try to make the claim in certain cases to support their false doctrine that God only pays attention to those that are in the church. Everything else is just in darkness. God doesn't see it. Well, that's not what the Bible says. Every single thing God sees. Every single thing God sees. What makes God, the one true and only living God, above all other forms of greatness? No man can ever reach or even fathom the capability to put together a system to be able to reach God's capability in terms of wisdom and knowledge. He knows everything. And in terms of God, it's not just everything in today's time and everything in real time. God's knowledge extends beyond man's lifespans. God's knowledge extends beyond the phases of world powers. God knows everything throughout time. No government, no power, no ruler could ever have that. Now, would they want it? Yes. Why? Because it would yield their power. But God has it above all man. And we know this, by the way, conceptually from just the timeline of the Bible. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4, but when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Why does that matter? Well, because of the promises of God. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, God said to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. God said that the Messiah was going to come from the seed of woman. It's not going to be AI. It's not going to be some alien life form. The Messiah, the answer to man and for man, would come from the seed of woman. But also born under the law. Born under the law. How is the Messiah and the promises and fulfillment thereof regarding the law? Think about Isaiah chapter 7, verse 13 beginning. Then he said, Hear now, O house of David, it is a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And so the Messiah would come from the seed of woman. The Messiah would come under the law. And so God is the King of all kings. 2 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 15. God is the King of all kings. And the knowledge that we have concerning his knowledge provokes us to fear, provokes us to grow in wisdom regarding his plan of salvation. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15. And remember, wisdom, the start of it is the fear of the Lord. Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 7. And so God's wisdom, God's knowledge far exceeds what man could even dream of having. What about God's might and power? What about God's might and power? Again, thinking about Jeremiah 9, verses 23 through 24, what makes God, the one true and only living God, above all other rulers, above all other powers? What is it that defines his greatness? Well, his power, let's think about it from the perspective of what he has designed, created, what he continues to uphold, and what will occur regarding the bringing to an end of physical existence. Think about Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. This automatically, by default, points to design. And typically we talk about design as it relates to proof of creation. And that creation occurred by design. And that is true and a great thought. But just think about also the association of power as it relates to design. Are there some structures that have been designed that you associate with power because of the design of those structures? Have you ever been to the St. Louis Arch? Is it Arch or Arc? I don't know that.
Arch.
No, y'all know. I mean, I've been told, I've Googled it, and I still don't remember. So y'all know. I'll just say St. Louis and then let y'all say it. That's incredible. The design of that is incredible. It speaks to power, capability, might. Have you ever seen other structures that just, your ability to comprehend how it was put together architecturally is just mind-boggling. New Orleans. Okay. So I've never been to that particular bridge, but I'll tell you this, and this just shows how little knowledge I have. I don't even know how a bridge is able to even work. Carnegie, I think, right, was one of the great designers in terms of the building of bridges. There are certainly, like the bridge in New Orleans, the one that was just mentioned, New Orleans, right, in that area? Yeah, that area. Other bridges I can think of course, the Golden Gate Bridge. Certain cities such as Charleston, Boston, for example, have bridges that you are just mesmerized by concerning their design. Any others?
The ones across the Mississippi River, and they used to, they still
Drawbridges type.
They open up,
Yeah.
so the ships.
Right. Yeah, that as well is just a phenomenal thing. What about just architecture general? I mean, you think about the Eiffel Tower, for example. You think about even Amazon's headquarters in Seattle, those glass spheres that they made. I mean, where people work in that. It's an office, and it's like a sphere of glass. I mean, that's incredible. Design itself and the ability to actually think through from an architectural perspective, how something can be sound from an engineering execution perspective is fascinating. I'm not even talking about actually building it. I'm just talking about the blueprints, right? That speaks to power. My understanding, and I don't know if this is true, do we have any tech folks? I can't remember. Do we have any Georgia Tech fans? I don't think so. Because if we did, you could speak to this probably. But the building in Atlanta, when you're down there at night and the tip of it is all lit up and it's got intricacies at the very top, my understanding is that that building, if you know which one I'm talking about, and I don't know which one it's called, it was built by a Georgia Tech engineering student who designed it at school, at Tech, whose teacher told him it was impossible to build. Well, to prove him wrong, he graduated and then had it built and put it literally right outside of the Tech campus to show that professor that he didn't know what he was talking about. But again, it speaks to what is he playing there? A little bit of a power game. Hey, I am right here. I knew what I was talking about. And so think about the design aspect. I'm not talking about creation here. I'm just talking about design of how the universe functions. God speaks to that. Let's look at Job chapter 38. Job chapter 38. If someone could read for me 4 through 11. Job 38, 4 through 11.
Where are you when I lay the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its setting? Surely you know. Will you stretch the line upon it? For what were its foundations fashioned? For who laid its cornerstone? And the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God passed before. Who should unscrew its doors when it burst forth and issued from the wind? And I made the clouds its garments, and put Spartans its swaddling bands. And I fixed my lamp for it, and set bars and doors, and I said, this far you may come, but no farther, and here your proud ways must.
You know what reading this passage makes me want to do? Sit down and be quiet. When I read this passage, I want to sit down and be quiet. Because I cannot fathom the passage. I can't. And I don't care how many degrees someone has. I don't care how many degrees someone has and how many disciplines they have those degrees. No one has the might, has the power concerning the construction of anything comparative to God. it's so beyond laughable and so beyond comprehension, you can't even really put the two up in the same discussion point. The way in which the universe functions, the capabilities regarding the physics and the framework and the intricacies of how the planets, the stars, the atmosphere, the ocean, the clouds, every piece functions is something we are not even capable of fully studying, much less understanding how to bring about. Not possible. He is the God, one true and only living God, of all other forms of power and structure and authority. And we see that in his design. If someone else can read 33 through 41, 33 through 41 of the same chapter. Through 41. The way creation was designed and the sustainment of that design is something that surpasses our ability to appropriately communicate. And so what does God do? He just asks questions. Did you do this? Who did this?
Solomon, in the last, chapter, basically, says all the things he's done, and he searched for all time.
Yes, correct.
One thing I remember, God created man in this humble stuff.
Yes.
The man is not prepared.
Yes. Yes.
There's all the medical know-how and everything. Man has never created a being from the dust of the earth.
Yep.
He can patch up on it and all these surgeries they give and all that, get people okay, but they're blind with the side effects. They're just not as good as what God has created.
That's right. That's right. And these thoughts are humbling in a time where, because of our technological capabilities, medical capabilities, overall education across the world, because of our access to information, man needs to be humbled. Because man probably now more than ever, broad stroke, is tempted to do exactly what we read in Judges chapter 21 and verse 25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. We as a people have thought of ourselves to be so just amazing. And aren't you tired of just constantly being bombarded with all of these news articles about AI this and digital that and advancement here and medical finding there? Great, but doesn't compare. Let's just be crystal clear. He is the God, the one true and only living God above all other power structure for the history of all mankind. Thank you all very much for the class.
I was not trying to get political, it just
Yeah,
me
out there, man. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
Hopefully.